National Interest magazines for sponsoring this, and also George O'Neill for sponsoring this as well. People will say that they want the parties to come together, they want us to get along, they want us not to yell and scream at each other and figure out how we can do something together to be good for the country. Well, I think foreign policy is one of those areas, and I think there is, some say, a right-left continuum. There is something that we can get along and talk about, and there really is evidence that it's been working. My personal belief is that we've been at war too long in too many places. It's around the globe. I mean, it's a war that really seems to have no end geographically, has no end temporally. It seems to go on and on of its own course. One's reminded of Orwell in 1984. We were at war with East Asia before West Asia before. You know, we're no longer clear why the war started. We've just been told we're now at war with a new country or a new nation. We now have soldiers that will be fighting that have been born after 9/11. We're still in Afghanistan. We have troops in 50 of 54 African nations. We have 1,000 troops in Mali. We have another 1,000 troops in Somalia. And if someone can explain to me the Somalian Civil War and all the different sides in Somalia and who we're supposed to be supporting and how world peace is going to break out after we solve Somalia, please get with me afterwards. There are more U.S. directed attacks in Africa, believe it or not, than the Middle East. Most people don't know this. We have more active military missions going on as we speak in Africa. And yet we've had no vote in Congress as to whether we should be at war in Africa, in any of these countries. We actually haven't voted in Congress in 16 years to authorize any war. I think President Trump was right in his State of the Union when he said that great nations don't fight perpetual war. And yet today we are mired in perpetual war, not only in Africa, but particularly in Afghanistan and throughout the Middle East. The congressional authorization to go to war in 9/11, after 9/11, is now used to justify war in Mali, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, you name it. There's probably 15 other places that supposedly they say we have authorized war. Much of this came from saying that we would be at war with associated forces, but if you read the 9/11 proclamation, it's not in there. In fact, even, I know Wikipedia is never wrong, but if you read Wikipedia on this, Wikipedia will say that 9/11 authorization was to go after the people who attacked us and associated forces. Doesn't mention that, well, that's not really true. The associated forces came later on as an interpretation by various administrations. So the original authorization never mentions associated forces, but this has come to be a big deal now, and it's really the justification for war everywhere, all of the time. And it's become really a justification for war against an ideology. Sometimes when the State Department or the government officials or military officials come before my committee, I like to ask them and put them on the spot. I haven't gotten a response yet, but I usually ask them, tell me who is left. Tell me who you would like to kill or capture or punish that had anything to do with 9/11. Tell me their name, and we'll talk about whether we should go after them. I've yet to hear a name. I don't think there is a name of an individual left that had anything to do with 9/11, directly or even indirectly. We're now talking about associated forces of associated forces. We're talking about descendant organizations. And it really completely obscures the fact that a lot of times war has to do with the local circumstances and the local customs, discriminations, and hatreds of various people in various parts of the world. But they're not all so simple as, you know, we hate America and we're going to come attack America next. There's been some debate as to how we fix this, and so there have been many that have come forward and they say, well, the problem is Congress is not acting, so we should act, and we should have a new AUMF. The problem I have is that the various permutations of the new AUMF have basically been to legitimize and give authorization to all the places we are at war. One of the ones that's come before our committee actually codifies for the first time associated forces, and I'm like, well, many of us have been disputing now for 2 decades that we should be at war with associated forces. Now you're putting it into the new authorization. And basically the way we read some of these new attempts at authorizing the war to do our job and for Congress to be involved, actually we think authorizes war in as many as 24 different countries. So that's not really what I'm trying to do. I want less war, not more war. And so I have opposed most of these new authorizations. I have supported sunsetting and getting rid of the authorizations. Most recently, Senator Udall and I put forward a resolution that would bring the troops home from Afghanistan and get rid of the authorization over a year's period of time, which I think both he and I think we could do quicker, but that was our compromise to say, well, wait a little while. But really, you know, when we offered this up, and when the discussion came forward, and when President Trump said that he was going to remove troops from Afghanistan, the other side, the neocons and the Hawks, put forward a resolution in the Senate immediately saying, no, we cannot leave. It would be precipitous. It's like, really? 17 years is precipitous? You know, I mean, a decade and a half, almost 2 decades, and it's precipitous. But then they also define it such that you can never leave. The other side of it is they define it, well, if you tell us when you're going to leave, you're telegraphing to the enemy when you will leave, and you're you know, cutting and running, and you're surrendering, and you're cowardly. So you can't announce when you're going to leave, which would be a gradual leave. You can't leave now, that's precipitous. Really, how do you leave? They've defined leaving as an impossibility. I think the biggest problem we have is that we've gotten away from the Constitution. The Constitution really envisioned that there would be a problem with the executive having too much power. They feared the kings, who were all brothers, sisters, cousins of each other in Europe, were always fighting. It seemed like there was perpetual war in Europe. We didn't want that, so we purposely didn't give that power. Madison put it this way. He said that the executive branch is the branch most prone to war. Therefore, the Constitution, with studied care, vested that power in the legislature. We haven't paid attention to that for so long. And occasionally you'll hear lip service to it, but we have the power to snatch it back at any point in time. Now, we did something, I think, profound that really was underreported and didn't get enough attention, is that's the invoking of the War Powers Resolution on Yemen. And basically saying to the President, we didn't authorize it. Not only did we not authorize it, we don't approve, and we want you to bring the troops home. Now, the resolution had some problems. It exempted Al-Qaeda, which to me was sort of the idea that tacitly we were saying 2001 authorization gave them the right to go after Al-Qaeda. I didn't want that in the resolution. But I did have them add one line that I've been adding to a lot of resolutions. And this is a line to say nothing in this resolution is to be interpreted as a new authorization for force. Because you realize if you exempt Al-Qaeda and then you vote for this, people can say, oh, well, you voted basically tacitly to give them the permission to have war in Yemen against Al-Qaeda. I'm not only against helping the Saudis fight the Houthis, I'm not for fighting anybody in Yemen unless we vote on going to Yemen, unless we vote on a war in Yemen. So I differ from some on that and have tried hard to make that point. But it was historic. I don't think we've ever before had both houses vote on something to rebuke the president and say that we shouldn't be at war. Even during Vietnam, Senator Leahy will talk about at the very end of like 75, one committee voting against funding. But really, it never, I think there may have been one full house, but there was never both full houses voting against the Vietnam War, even as unpopular as it was. We have 165,000 troops overseas. We have active war in Somalia, Mali, Libya, Niger, Algeria, Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen, and the list goes on. We also have troops in a supporting role in large presences around the world that there's been some discussion of. We have 35,000 still in Germany, and I thought it was telling a comment from Merkel last week when she said that absolutely there's no way in the world she can reduce one iota the foreign aid she gives to other countries in order to improve or increase her defense spending. I thought that was a pretty informative statement that she's giving money away to other countries, but she still expects us to take the bill for NATO. We, I think, are 22% of NATO. I'm kind of like the same as the UN. I think we should pay proportionally. So if there's 28 countries in NATO, I'm for 128. There's 140 of the UN, or however many of the UN, I think 140th, I'd be happy. I'm not against diplomacy, and not even completely against NATO, but I don't like footing the bill, and I also don't like the idea that I think many of the new countries that we've added have simply been tripwires to get us involved, to possibly get us involved in other wars. While I say right and left have come together, I think there is one area where there's been an impediment. And I think the impediment has been, the last election. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. President Trump won the electoral vote, and there's still a great deal of unhappiness. The country's evenly divided. But I think because of it, we're losing out on some things in the foreign policy realm that could be done better. I frankly am for more diplomacy, even with Russia. I'm for more diplomacy, even with North Korea. And I think that particularly with Russia, we haven't been able to have a thawing in any kind of relations or improved diplomacy, and we're losing some real things because of it. I think one of the extraordinary things that Reagan did that was outside what people expected of him to do was the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty. It was a big deal, and some people say he got it done because only a person who people thought was so strong on national defense could actually make a treaty with Russia. But it's now going by the wayside. The New START Treaty may wane and go away as well. But I think some of it's because we've become so angry at each other, the Trump investigation, that some on the Democrat side aren't willing to say, well, we still should have relations with Russia. I frankly think we should take sanctions off of Russian legislators. I think we should let them travel to this country. Now, I was unsuccessful with that, but I've been promoting the idea. I've almost given up because I only vote for it right now. But I think it's a good idea because you don't know who among these Russian legislators might be the next Gorbachev. Maybe there's a 35-year-old Russian legislator in the Duma who comes to our country and then visits again. Maybe they like the arts or the literature or the openness of our society and they want that for their country. Maybe they're influenced by coming here. If we don't have them come here, it's a problem. Plus, we cannot talk about our differences if we don't let them come. In conclusion, I would say that I don't think a new AUMF is really the answer if it authorizes war. I want to try to end wars, and so I'm for ending AUMFs, but not really for a new AUMF, really probably of any kind. But most of the new AUMFs have not been limiting, they've been too expansive, and I think I'm afraid authorize more war. The big constitutional question, not only with war, but also with spending up here, is the separation of powers. Our founding fathers were very prescient, they were very specific, they really divided up the power so somebody wouldn't get too much, and the checks and balances were meant to stymie too much power accumulating anywhere. I think recently the issue of spending is a problem. We can't let the president spend money. We had a huge debate up here. You can agree or disagree on how much we should spend on the border, but we had a huge debate and Congress made a decision. Look, I disagree with almost all the decisions the Senate makes, but that's the way it works. And we can't just sort of say the president, because he disagrees with what he got, and just spend more. So I'm working on a new bill, Emergency Powers Act. We're going to try to get bipartisan support that removes a lot of the emergencies and makes sure that no president, this president or the next, can spend money that wasn't authorized. In this bill, we'll take away such emergencies that some people didn't realize exist, but they're very alarming. There's an emergency from 1934 that allows the president to take over all the television stations, all the radio stations, and really it's even less specific than that. Probably Alexa, I mean, everything you can imagine. Respect the government should forbid that. But anyway, but the thing is it takes over all electronic transmissions and all broadcasts. The president could do this under emergency. So it isn't just the access through the Emergency Act that's a problem, which we should change to make it more difficult. We need to eliminate some of the emergencies that we have we've had on the books that presidents haven't used but could use. Finally, I think it's important that there is right and left getting together. There's so much anger out there. All you got to do is tune into any comments on the internet. And I would say that from my perspective, it doesn't represent Washington. It's one of the, if there is fake news, this is it, that we hate each other. Senator Udall and I have had a good relationship. I don't think we've ever had a cross word. We don't agree on everything. We have disagreements on several things. On some we agree. On foreign policy we have a great deal of agreements. On civil liberties, on privacy, we have a lot of agreements. But the thing is we are not up here yelling and screaming at each other. Most of us have a good relationship. I could probably tell you 8 out of 10 things that I do disagree with him on, but we're not going to do that because we're going to work on the things we work on together. And really that's the way Washington is working. And it's so misreported. And I've enjoyed working with Senator Udall. I was talking to him the other day because he announced he was going to retire in 2 years. And he said before he retires, he's going to try to end the war in Afghanistan. Senator Udall.
thank you, Rand, so much, and that's a big task for us to do that in the next 2 years. So, but greetings.